Hey, Michael with XForcePC. I want to talk about our new Platinum system, which replaces our Titanium system. And I'll tell you, really the main reason for this replacement of the Titanium is the fact that Intel has come out with its 8th generation core processors. So the previous generation was the 7700K and the 8600K. That's what we used. No, I said that wrong. The 7700K and the 7600K, which we used in the Titanium. And now we have the 8700K and the 8600K for the Platinum system. And so the first number in the naming convention for the Intel processors is the generation. So the 8700K, 8th generation. 7700K, 7th generation. Now there's not a big difference between the two generations. The Skylake and Coffee Lake are the two Intel sort of code names for the generation. So we're now on Coffee Lake. We just came off of Skylake. Really the main difference is there's a little bit of a clock speed bump. There's a slight performance advantage. The other thing is we have to change motherboard chipsets. So the new 8th generation processors only run on the Z370 chipset. And so that's what we have here. And there will be a low-end chipset that they introduced, but that hasn't come out yet. The only one they've introduced so far is the Enthusiast chipset, and that's what we use. So this is the motherboard. Not a whole lot of difference here. The physical socket is actually exactly the same as the previous generation, but Intel decided to make you have to buy a new motherboard if you want the new generation. I don't know why, but they did. The difference between this Z370 and the Z270, which it replaces, is so inconsequential I'm not even going to go into it. You can Google it if you want to know. They're so small, the differences. Now, going over the motherboard here, we've got a couple of X16 slots for graphics cards. Really, you only need one with X-Plane in most games. We have 4 DIMM slots here, 2 of which will be populated with 8 gig sticks, assuming you go with the amount of RAM that comes with the system. We do give you the option to upgrade it. Let's see, along the back here, we've got USB 3.0, 3.1, 2.0, gigabit Ethernet, 8-channel audio, all the things that we've had for quite some time. There's not a lot of changes there. We also have an M.2 slot here on the motherboard for an SSD. And actually now they have a second one, so if you wanted to have a second M.2 SSD, you could have one. Realistically, that's the biggest difference between this board and the previous board, is a second M.2 slot. And then of course the fact we can support the 8th generation Intel processors. Now I will tell you that there's only about a 0 to 10% performance boost between 7th and 8th generation Intel processors. And when I say 0 to 10, it depends on what you're doing. In some cases you could see as much as 10, in some cases you see as little as 0, and sometimes you see 5% or so. It just depends on what the workload is as to whether you'll see much of a difference. Now looking at the physical box, we have a full-size ATX case, but it's not crazy big, as you can tell. I don't like cases that are just overly large just for the sake of being large, and this one definitely is not. It's made by Corsair, by the way, so it's a really good case. We have a power button here in the front. We have 2 USB 3.0s. We've got a fan speed selector. We've got a microphone and headphone jack, and we've got a reset button, and of course a hard drive activity light. Now moving over to the side here, we've got a windowed side panel, and we have a 700 watt power supply. Total system draw, when I'm just really trying to draw as much power as possible, stays under 400 watts, and so 700 is plenty for the power supply. We've optioned this system with a GTX 1070, but we offer bigger cards if you decide you want to upgrade the graphics card, and I'll have a separate video on whether or not you should do that or not. We have a nice tower cooler from Cooler Master. The air from that flows this way and then comes right out the back, and we'll look at the back here in a minute. We also put in, as I mentioned earlier, 2 sticks of DDR4, and there'll be 2 slots open unless you decide you want to upgrade the RAM right out of the gate. But if you don't, you'll have 2 memory slots open and available. I think that covers the inside, so let's move over to the back. Oh, by the way, we have the feet give it a nice elevation here. I can stick my hand under here, and the good thing about that is it allows air to flow into the power supply. Power supply draws air directly underneath, and there is a filter there. So on the back here, we have sort of the standard stuff. I showed you this earlier on the motherboard, but USB 3, USB 3.1, USB 2.0, 8-channel audio, and that, obviously we talked about that a little bit earlier. This is that fan that blows right out the back, so when the CPU cooler blows the air this way, it hits this fan and goes right out. This little sticker here is to cover up my Windows sticker. I didn't want that number showing up on the internet, by the way, in case you were wondering why that piece of paper is there. And of course we have the graphics card. This is the view of it from the back. Most graphics cards come with 3 display ports, 1 HDMI and a DVI, but that can vary. But if you get the cables from us, you check the little box that says I want you to send me the cables for triple display. We'll make sure you have the right cables that you need. And just to be clear, when we do a multi-monitor system, all of the monitors plug directly into the graphics card. There is no box or splitter or anything like that. They all plug right into the graphics card. And that is a brief overview of the Platinum system, which replaces the Titanium. And I'll have some additional videos where I talk about some of the options you can pick for this and why you may or may not want to pick those.